Now, having looked at an introduction into sustainable financial planning, and in part two, going through the steps of a conservation investment plan, the framework, and what exactly you need to follow to develop a CIP, we take a look at some experiences and practical realities of developing and implementing the CIP in steps 1, 2, 3. This takes a look at a few ground level realities of developing the CIP and based off our experiences in year 1 of this project. We know that we had a strong starting point to developing a CIP. The DWC has developed a management plan for the VNR that focuses on a 5-year step-by-step delivery of conservation outcomes. This is ultimately a conservation strategy at the VNR. This was beneficial for the development of a CIP because it outlines a very clear budget as well as action plan and line items in order for DWC to implement in the coming 5 years. So this in fact gave us a really good footing to understand the department as the conservation authority's approach to protected area management, as well as it gave us the opportunity to base the CIP very much closely to an existing management plan. We wanted to use these site level insights, working very closely with DWC, to also enrich our experiences and work and slowly lead to more macro level solutions that can actually be implemented at other sites as well. We wanted to highlight that a management plan isn't necessarily a compulsory prerequisite to a conservation investment plan. What does this mean? Having looked at our examples abroad in terms of Myanmar and Vietnam, as well as what can be locally developed and managed, we know that the focus needs to be on the information, the commitment, and the structure that a management plan brings in to protected area management. This is only to reinforce the conservation investment plan or any sustainable financial plan that can be implemented. While a proper understanding of our approach and outputs can be obtained on our website, we wanted to focus through the CIP and our work in the last year on 2 key aspects: the practicality of developing and implementing such a plan, a financial plan, as well as the inclusivity aspect, making sure that all stakeholder considerations are valued and find its way in to the financial plan as well. This we felt would help the Conservation Authority, in our example the DWC, better develop a muscle for conservation investment planning, as well as increase the likelihood of such plans being developed in other protected area sites in the future. Now let's take a look and focus on some of the experiences we encountered while developing the CIP following steps 1 to step 3. Step 1 focuses on understanding DWC's processes and budget. In this step, we needed to look at what exactly they had put down in the management plan, as well as closely understand the steps that they followed internally to develop the VNR management plan. Here, we know that this is the first time such a plan has been developed by the Department of Wildlife itself for a protected area in Sri Lanka. Therefore, the experiences that they have and shared and the processes that they described were new to being implemented. This highlighted the importance of having a structure in terms of a conservation strategy that can better facilitate having a conservation investment plan or sustainable financial plan for conservation around it. This structured approach is important to make sure that any changes and any future developments also follows a process that is similar and that can be looked at in this way. In step 2, looking at VNR's true budget and processes, we had a question of if all stakeholders were considered. Here, it's important to realize that in a protected area, which is in a vast space, here, taking the example of VNR, which is a large space that interacts with many stakeholder groups and different people and communities, it's important to realize that these interactions need to be taken into consideration and reflected in a financial plan. This is only likely to strengthen the final plan as it actually looks at all these nuances being understood. This is likely to give a more grounded, well-rounded understanding of what exactly the opportunities and risks are in terms of the financial aspects that affect a protected area. Here it's important to point out that stakeholder expectations and considerations have been factored in to some extent to the management plan. However, having a more regular, more grounded approach, which might be mapped out, is important, as well as considering all stakeholders, including businesses and other development agencies. This is because all these stakeholders do in fact play a part not only to the ecological protection of the VNR, but also to the financials and the financial ecosystem that is present there. In step 3, we look at the budget gap. And what we experienced in looking at this gap, or attempting to look at this gap, was the fact that not all site level expenses have been duly considered. What does this mean? Again, this factors in to making sure that all stakeholder expenses that come under one of the costs that we discussed in the earlier video in part 2, need to be considered and ideally need to be addressed in a management plan. If the budget does not capture this, it needs to be captured in another document, such as a conservation investment plan. And this leads us to the overall reflection about how an approach should be done locally. And this draws directly from the experiences that have been faced in Myanmar and Vietnam. It's important to make sure that all stakeholders are considered in every aspect of the development of such a plan. Looking at the example that's shown on the experiences seen in Myanmar and Vietnam, we know that stakeholder considerations need to be taken into the final conservation investment plan. So this can be done through having multiple participatory sessions where certain questions along the lines of step 1 to step 3 are asked directly from the stakeholders. This involves community members, local businesses, as well as development agencies that have either operations or a vested interest in the protection of the protected area in question. By having all these individuals and stakeholders present and giving their opinions, sharing their experiences in terms of the activities that they engage in that relate to the protected area site, you're better able to get a proper understanding of what exactly the financial costs, cost bearers, and ultimately plan should look like. We know that this sort of approach is relatively new to Sri Lanka, where you have experts, usually external parties, come and diagnose a problem from a distance and give solutions. However, we feel this approach that embeds the stakeholders and their considerations into the solution, being the financial plan, and the innovative solutions that the financial plan proposes, is more likely to be successful given that it has given all costs and cost bearers due consideration. So having walked through the framework and steps 1 to steps 3 of what developing a CIP looks like, and having understanding what the experiences of following these steps in reality were, let's quickly recap the logic of financial planning for conservation that looks at diagnosing the problem. It's important that thinking about conservation planning and the resulting financial planning around it is approached in this way. However, we know that different individuals thinking about financial planning is likely to lead to discussing and executing such financial plans in terms of organizations and structures coming together. This brings us to the end of the 3-part short video series. Thank you for your time.